This conference will now be recorded.
So we're going to see asynchronous Apex. So every class we are writing, we are executing the class what we written so far, the Apex code. It runs asynchronously, right? So any class you take, when you call a method, the method, if a method has some logic, then next to that method you are going to call another method. Got me? I just giving in the form of different format here. The method 1 call method 2. So we have a statement in the method, line 1, line 2. Then I call the method. I call the method here, right? And I also call a method 3 here. Then I have a statement instead of line 1. I say statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, and we have statement 4 here, right? So there are 3 methods I have. So when method how the process being run, this process 1, process 2, process 3, right? So the method 3 will execute after method 2. The method 2 will execute after this statement, first 3 statement run, and statement 4 will run after statement method 3, right? So all the statement in the method 3 run, then statement 4 will run. So which means every process basically run in sequential manner, right? Sequential process, one after the other, one after the other. Okay. Suppose the method 4 takes a 1 minute time to run the process, and your method 2 takes 2 hour time to run the process, and these two methods, if can run independently, it means no dependency. If no dependency between these two methods, right? If the method 3 just takes a minute, then method 2 takes more hour, then method 3 has to wait for long hours to run the process, right? This is something like you suppose, right, there are 3 persons standing in a queue. Okay, there are some person in a queue. Buying in a billing counter, for example. In a billing counter, uh, there is a queue. The person A has 50 products to bill, right? And person B has just 5 products to bill, and person C has 100 products to bill, and person D has just 1 product to bill, right? So if you say in the queue, right, in the queue, the person C doesn't have any dependency with the person B, right? P doesn't have a dependency with person A. All are individual process. You can say all are individual process, no dependency between each other. But when you run the process sequentially, when they run the process sequentially, the process D has to wait for all the process to complete, isn't it? Which is not needed in the case of business application. The process which takes long time, which take long duration, right? Which take long time to no complete. We can have a separate queue for this process. A long running process can run in separate queue, isn't it? So we may have additional bill counter, says like more than 30 products, more than 10 products can be in a separate queue, right? So like that, a long running process, a process which takes long time, we can run this process alone in a separate queue. We can separate this in a different queue and no dependency. Something like your asynchronous process, right? It's like nothing but asynchronous process. In the action support function in your Visual Force page, isn't it? Action support, you remember? So when you when you call Apex method based on event, right? When you call Apex method based on event, the method invokes asynchronously, which means the method may take long time, but you can the current resource will not be hold because that initiates in separate thread, right? So likewise, in Apex, whatever the logic takes longer time, which doesn't have any dependency, we can let the process to run in a separate queue, which will not have any dependency with the current process. So when the process that runs in a queue, once completed, you will get this status, isn't it? So, right, how to run an Apex code asynchronously? Currently, whatever we have seen, no, it's all sequential process. One after the other will run. But how to run the process asynchronously, right? Which means in a separate thread, in a separate, it will goes to the queue like your time-dependent workflow. What happens? It goes to the queue, right? So likewise, we can run a business logic asynchronously. What are the frameworks we have to run the process asynchronously? There are 4 different frameworks we have to run the process asynchronously. Able to follow this, all of you? Whatever concept I explained, the purpose, you got it? Everyone? Everyone here? Okay. Right. So are all there in the group, ma? In your group, only what happened to others? Yesterday I seen Sona and whether she doesn't aware we have a class today. I think yesterday she was there, right? I mentioned it in the class. Today we have a class, isn't it? Okay, anyway, drop the message in the group if possible. Okay. So there are 4 ways you can run the process synchronously. One is feature method, long running process, which takes longer time. You can let them run in separate queue. And queueable Apex, again, we have differences when you go for feature method and queueable Apex framework. And batch Apex, your long running process, which process large volume of data. Got me? So the batch Apex basically a framework which will help you to process large volume of data. It's not just a long running process. It's not like only large volume of data takes longer time, right? It's not like only large volume of data takes longer time. When your process, when your business, process large volume of data, then you'll go for batch Apex. Okay, this framework will uh, process the data in terms of batches, like your data loader, right? When you process 1 million data, it's not like all the 1 million data is processed sequentially. It divides the 1,000 records, for example, you process. It divides into 5 different batches. 200 records will process in each batch. Each batch will process 200 by default. Okay, that's the type of process. And scheduled Apex, you certain process, you logic, you can run to run at a specific time. You schedule it to run at every every an hour, every hour once it has to run, or daily once it has to run. Okay, so you can do that using schedule Apex. So all these are all frameworks to run the process asynchronously. Okay, so we'll start with the future method. We'll start with future method. Just hold on. Okay, the future method is basically whenever you have long running statement that needs to be run in a separate queue, then you go for future method. Got me? If the statements are not having a dependency, right? Like we discussed here, yeah, process method 2 the no dependency on method 1. In that cases, we can separate this, right? We can let it run to in a separate queue, right? So in such cases, you can separate it, or else you have to run sequentially. Got me? The basic constraint and right. So and and what is the rule we have to define a method to run a method uh, at a future method? For example, let me. So there is a process A run 3 statement, then it calls a process B which has 3 statement, but next to the, I mean, third statement, I mean, next to the statement 2, it calls another process B and like this, right? And we have a call process and we call process A. So what will happen in this case? Which statement will there in the log first? Which statement will be there in the log first? How the statement will get um, display in the log? Will get process, right? 1, 2, 3, isn't it? We'll get process 1, 2, 3, and then it invokes the process B, isn't it? Process B, 1, 2, then what happens? The process C will call, process C will call. Then once process D is done, then process statement 3 of process B will display, then process D, isn't it? So what does it mean? This is a sequential, right? This sequential way it run this statement. This is your synchronous process. Okay, what is the limit you have in the synchronous process for your SOQL? What is the limit you have in the synchronous process for your SOQL? The limit of SOQL, how many SOQL you can run in one transaction? That is for your synchronous process. Got me? How many SOQL you can run? I'm not talking about the number of rows you can retrieve. Only 100 SOQL you can run in synchronous process. Okay, so let's see how to run some of these method asynchronously. Suppose uh, I need to run the process B asynchronously. It takes long time. An assumption, it takes long time. I would like to separate this process, right? I'm going to call the process A only, but when the process B invoked, then this process, whatever we have inside this, will run in a separate queue. So how to separate process B from process A? If process B takes long time, then how to separate this? Okay, so this is how we have seen so far. Now we are going to see how to run a part of your business logic, right? We have in this process B, whatever statement we have, we'd like to run in separate queue. Okay, assumption it takes longer time, then how to separate this in a different asynchronously and to let it run in separate queue, right? So what are you going to do? We are going to use annotation here. You know what other annotation you know all so far? Is there any annotation you know already? Is there any annotations you know already? Test, right? The annotation will change the behavior of your class, right? So this method now it considers asynchronous process. So now what is the other rule? It should be a static method. May or may not return value. It should be a static method now. Okay, it should be a static method, and every method you are going to invoke from static method should also be a static only, right? This is static, and anything inside this should also be a static, isn't it? That is we know already, right? Right, to save this without syntax error, it should be a static. Okay, now we are going to call this call process. Then we'll see how it let's go to debug log. Okay, so debug log gives you statement uh, uh, where is it? Log. Okay, so we have two log as created, right? One is for future method, two process run. It's not just one log, two process run. One is a future method, and another is your synchronous process. So in the synchronous process, you see statement 1, 2, and 3 was displayed, and process B, everything inside the process B is a static. So all the rest of the debug statement goes here. Got me? So we're able to separate the two processes, right? We're able to separate, right? Whatever we run inside process B, we make them run as a future method, which means it runs in a separate queue, right? Where else we can see if suppose the process takes longer time, where I can monitor this? You have to go to jobs and have to go to the Apex jobs, and you will see here it will be here. Suppose it is in process, it is in queue, waiting for resource, it will be here. You can monitor over here. Okay, so these are the now you can run your a part of your Apex logic uh, asynchronously. Suppose I like to run this statement, right? Considering this takes longer time, for example, we are given only system debug statement here, but in general, if it is going to be a business logic which takes longer time, how can I run this in a separate process? Just move this into a method. Move this into a method. What is the rule? The method should be a static void. Okay, void, and it should have annotation at future. You got this? You got this? So what will happen now? How the statement will? How many process will run now in this case? How many process will run? How many process may I run in this case? 4 process. Okay, this is process 1, and this will be in one queue, and this whole thing will be in one queue. So how many? I believe it's going to be 3, isn't it? Yep. Okay. I think process A, since one after the other feature, it takes only one feature method. Yes, the reason process A run synchronously, and process B is a feature, and yeah, sorry, process A is a feature, and next to that process B we call, and all are in one process. It's not, see, the thing is, we are going to see other consideration, like one feature cannot call another feature. Okay, we'll see that. Then in that case, what is the other framework will help you to run the long running process one after the other. Suppose I have dependency between the two features, that cannot be done. You cannot call one feature for another feature like this. I'm just missing something here, right? Somewhere something is missing. This cannot be done. Okay, one feature cannot call another feature. I am quite surprised to see this. 1 minute. see the feature method documentation. We'll come to know is any changes or anything needs to be referred it. Okay, it don't return any value. You can call feature for long running method and limitations. Um, one feature can't invoke another feature method, right? One feature can't invoke another feature method. When we have such situations, we go for different framework. But now I try to recreate that, right? So process A, okay, we call the process, then it run process B. Okay, we'll do one thing. I just going to do like this. Process A, process A feature, right? I have to check this. Okay, it's right. It works in this way. When you call the feature method and that feature calls another feature, it gives a exception. Okay, but through this, process A calls process feature one feature and right after the other, and it run. But still, if you see, 1 minute, process A, yeah. We get one feature. It's not like one feature right after the other. It's not called. It considers one feature. When you invoke from a synchronous process, then it considers one feature. But when you just call this feature, then it takes like one feature calling another feature. It won't be allowed. You see this? So when the as per the guide, okay, as per the guide, it was given like feature cannot call another feature, but it happens in other way, right? Right, but you should have understanding. Don't ever call one feature for another feature. That won't run. Okay, so it's like it's having exception, like when you call from process A, synchronous process, then feature, then again another feature. Oh, okay, right. We made a typo here. Right. Okay, isn't it? We made a typo here. You're supposed to give this statement, right? No one has noticed this. Even I just that's what I made a big confusion here. Okay, sorry. Right, it made a big confusion. So now I hope it. You see, right? You see an issue like a feature cannot call another feature, right? It's follow this. No, there is no second thought because we are earlier made a typo over here. Earlier made a typo over here. We didn't call the process A feature. We never call the process A feature, right? It just included the statement right now. Got me? That's why the confusion occurred. I don't know what to say here, so I just put it like other way. It doesn't work in that way, right? So now it's going fine. So we made a typo here. Now you see, one feature cannot call another feature. You get an exception. Okay, that is right. That is one of the consideration you should know. And other consideration, the feature cannot accept argument other than primitive. The feature method cannot accept argument other than primitive. So I can have a argument like a string or list of string. I can have a string or list of string as an argument. Okay, but I cannot. I can call this method and I can pass. I can do this. Again, sorry, I need to fix that. I mean, I need to remove that call statement. Uh, we are just testing whether the future, what type of arguments the future will accept. So we can pass a primitive type of argument to the feature. Primitive type of argument to the feature we can pass, but we cannot pass an object type argument. We cannot pass to the future method. Right? It ran. So we cannot pass an argument other than primitive type. The method of the future cannot take S objects or object type as an argument. You can only pass primitive, and list of primitive you can pass, and collections of, I mean, any type of list or set or map, you can pass, but not the S object type. Suppose, I like to pass account A, right? I pass account A. The primitive do not support parameter type account. What could be the reason why it may not support the primitive type? Why not support primitive type? Suppose I have process. I run the process feature method process. This is a feature method. The feature method goes to the queue, right? Suppose this is a feature method which accepts an argument of account variable, and it goes to the queue, isn't it? We need to monitor the feature method. It goes to the queue, right? And I have an account table. Okay, I have an account table where I read the data. The account name is SFDC Meet and industry is education. So this is the data I just pass to the method. When the feature method goes to the queue, this is the data I pass. The feature method takes time, right? Because it's a asynchronous process. It based on the resource availability, the process will run and complete, right? Right. Meantime, the process complete. I change the data. I change this. The name SFDC from SFDC Meet to SFDC Limited. Okay, I change the annual revenue of the organization from one annual revenue to different annual revenue, right? So the process in that case will process incorrect data, right? Because I modify the data, because the process goes to the queue, and the user will modify the data which is not reflected in the process, right? When the process goes to the queue, then we'll have no dependency between your object and your process, isn't it? You are able to follow this. So no dependency, right? So any process you change and will not have it's not going to take the recent data, right? Where else right? In the case of if you right, if so no reason, right? The reason the system will not accept S object type argument for your future method. Got me? You follow this? You follow this? The future method will not accept S argument type argument feature method feature for future. It's only accept primitive. It can be a string or any type of primitive, or it can be a collection type. Okay, but not the S object type. You got the consideration? You got the rules? It should be a static method, and it's right, will not return any value, and it will only accept string primitive variables and collection variable, but not object type. Will not accept object type. Okay, so you follow this? Right. So long running process we run using future method. What are the other scenarios you'll use feature method? When you perform DML, when you perform DML for both setup object and non-setup objects. What do you mean by setup and non-setup objects? In testing framework, I have discussed about this. What is setup objects and what is non-setup objects? Does anyone remember this? Does anyone remember this? Is anyone remembering this? What is setup objects? The objects that are uh, related to storing permission related data, well, like your user object, roles, user role, user, a permission set. All these objects are considered as setup objects. What is non-setup objects? Your business data objects. Okay, where you store the business data, account, lead, and all your custom objects considered as non-setup objects. When you perform DML in the same transaction in both the objects, then you will get an exception called mixed DML exception. You cannot mix these two exceptions together. Okay, you cannot mix a exception in the same transaction against these objects. Suppose I'm inserting a user for a role, Okay, I'm inserting a user for a role, and in the same transaction, I am inserting an account record. Inserting account record, you'll get a mixed DML exception. Okay, so to avoid mixed DML exception, if there is a process which we need to do DML in both the objects, then we have to separate one process with the help of feature method. Okay, so one process will go to the queue. Suppose we process we perform some logic against the database from different objects, but in the same transaction we also have inserting a user or updating the role of a user. Some DML you perform against setup objects, then one long running process or any of these processes you can separate with the help of feature method to avoid mixed DML exception. You follow this? You follow this? So when you go for feature method to run a long running process, and right, to run a long running process, if there no process has a dependency, and to avoid a mixed DML exception. Got me? You got the questions, entry questions, how to what is the reason behind that? I mean, why you go for feature method? Shall we proceed with some example? Shall we proceed with some example? So feature method is to avoid mixed DML exception, isn't it? So let me take a scenario here. So what I do in this class, I have two method. I have method insert user. So what I'm trying to do is just a scenario to recreate the mixed DML exception. Right. I'm trying to insert a user for a role. I'm trying to insert a user for a role. Okay, role is marketing team. Marketing team role. Standard platform user is a profile and role is a marketing team. I'm going to assign, create a user here through programmatically. Okay, programmatically I'm going to create a user. So what will happen? What we discuss now, the feature. I mean, the mixed DML exception is not allowed. A DML against the a DML against the user account object, non-setup objects, and DML against the setup objects cannot be done in the same transaction. Okay, so what I do? I take an instance and I just call this method and to my DML statement where line number 5, why it is so? Why it is so? Maybe because of any trigger or something we had. Um, Let me check. The recursive trigger. Yeah, the recursive trigger. Because of this trigger, because we insert the account, right? Then it runs. Then again, it insert the account. Uh, isn't it? Then again, it run the process. I think maybe because of this, what I do, I deactivate the trigger. So in platform within platform, how to deactivate the trigger? Go to text triggers. Okay, edit. Edit the trigger, and then we'll see. Okay, somewhere an issue. Insert user. Account main trigger. Okay. I think because of trigger. After insert again, it goes here maybe, right? Our objective is not to analyze and fix this. Our objective is to learn the feature concept. So I just deactivate and try. Okay, if it's in My objective is not to debug the things, okay, which is going in other direction. I just, yeah, so this is what I'm trying to write. Yeah, because of the trigger, okay, but real time you may have to fix this, but now we are focusing on feature method concept. So you see here, I get a mixed DML exception, right? This exception says you cannot perform DML. It's not permitted against setup objects and non-setup objects, and vice versa, whatever, right? So one after the other, you should not do. Either you do against DML against permission setup objects and non-setup objects. Either way, it's not allowed. You'll get an exception. So you reason no, you'll use switcher method to separate one process from the other. Right? All you have to do is you have to move this logic to another method. Right? You have to now to move this logic to another method. Right? Then you make all this method. Okay. And what is the rule? It must be feature. So when you run this process now, you'll see one will go to the queue, right? Another will go to the another will be a synchronous process. One will go to the queue. It's failed because of maybe no license available. The feature fails here. Let's check jobs, jobs. Okay, duplicate name. So reason it's fails because we already have the name, similar name. Maybe you have to change the username, then you'll see. Okay, username issue, right? Whatever. So you are able to do this, because we separate the two process. So feature method is used to avoid mixed DML exception, bypass the mixed save DML error, and other when you call a web service from your trigger, when you call a web service from a trigger, yesterday we have discussed that one, right? In a trigger, if you like to call an external web service, then you have to use feature method to call the process asynchronously. This my trigger. The trigger will run a large volume of data. So inside the for each loop, and for every instance I need to call the external system. For every instance I need to call the external system. It cannot be sequentially. You cannot call, right? If you sequentially call, then what would happen? Your trigger has to wait for the response from the external system to respond, and then it continues the process, right? So the no response time is can be predicted for external system, isn't it? It goes to the queue, right? It has to go to the queue. Then you have to continue your process in the trigger. So when you call any external call out, you call it as call out. When you do any call out from trigger, then what you will do? You'll have that method prefixed with at feature annotation, and that should be a feature method, isn't it? Public static and void Okay, so whatever process you have, and you will run this. But only one exception here is you have to use a parameter called, you have to pass the parameter call out equal to true. So when you do this, you can make a call out. So from here we make call out. Okay, we will follow this. So inside which you may have your for statement, and right, suppose if it's a trigger, right, you will have here for statement here, then you will have call out state, I mean calling the external web service. Got me? So that will go to the queue. Any queries you have? We'll get to get into the demo in your integration session. Okay, next to this we'll going to start the integration session, right? We'll see these things practically. Okay, I mean feature method call out we are going to see practically later, calling the external system web service. Any question on feature method? You guys follow this? Any question? Anybody? Anybody has any queries? Anybody has any queries? Shall I walk through it? Shall I walk through some important concept in the feature method now? The feature method will not return job ID. Okay, the feature method will not return job ID. Some of the limitations will not return job ID. When you have a job ID in place, then we can monitor the status programmatically, isn't it? So now how we are monitoring? We go to the feature Apex jobs and monitor it. But if you have a if you have a need to check the status when the feature runs, then I'm going to initiate another process. But currently, how do you check programmatically? Unless if you don't know the job ID, everything you run here will have some job ID. Okay, we don't know the job ID because feature method doesn't return, and one feature cannot another feature, right? We already seen this, isn't it? One feature cannot call another feature. Suppose there are two long running process as dependency. One process is done and I need to initiate call another process. We cannot done chaining the process. It's called chaining, one after the other. Both are asynchronous. It cannot be done. Okay, right? Limitation. And what are the other limitation? We already discussed this, right? A feature cannot accept S object type argument, right? Even we cannot save that. That will give an syntax error, right? It's not just a compilation error you get. You cannot able to save the method with a feature method with S object type. It can be account or any standard or custom objects. You cannot do that. Okay. And limitations within a transaction, we can only call 5 feature method in one transaction, right? And yes, and when you go for feature method, avoid a mixed DML exception. We have seen, right? So one process setup and non-setup objects together we cannot do. So we separate one process. And in the case of trigger, when you do call out, then you'll go with add feature call out equal to true. Okay, and yes, there is another framework, right? We are going to discuss from that framework. If you like to call web service again, feature method is a approach. You will just have to make a method static and add feature annotation. Okay, right, and we know this. It cannot be allowed. List of account is again an object type only. It won't be allowed. It won't be allowed. Okay, list of string is allowed. List of date is allowed. List of boolean is allowed, but not list of object type. Then how to pass? Suppose I need to pass account record to another another method. I am going to call another method from here. To that method, for this method I need to call feature method. I need to pass the account record. What I have to do? I can pass in this format, right? I can only pass the account ID to the feature method. instead of passing accepting account, I get only account ID, and for that account ID, I get account record from the database again by using query. You got me? What's the workaround? Workaround to avoid, S object type. If in case you get account records, account object records for the feature method, then how to accept the IDs, ID of this record instead of account, because this cannot be saved. But this is acceptable, right? Because it's a primitive type. You able to follow this, all of you? Able to follow this? What is the workaround for this? You may get this type of question in your interview. Shall I proceed? Any question here? Any question here? I want to know you got it. Okay. The other way, there is you can convert a record into a string format. So what is the format of the data you are storing in the objects? JSON format. JSON format will looks like this, right? Count, colon, braces. Everything is a property name value pair name. You seen the token, right? How it returns like that. Isn't it? Like this. So you cannot pass the record like this. Instead, you can convert this into a string. So what happens here? Using a method, there is a standard class called JSON serialize, which means this data can be serialized into a string. Deserialize means string to object type. Okay, so object type is serialized into string type. Now I can pass accept this string, right? Then how to deserialize back? Again, we have method here inside the feature method. Okay, so we are going to see this much more detailed demonstration in the integration class. These are all more relevant to your integration, how to work with the JSON format. Okay, it's going to be detailed session in the integration class. Okay, so this is just a quick overview of the feature method limitations and some of the important questions you may get in your interview. Follow this, all of you? Follow this? Okay. And we have a Queueable Apex. Queueable Apex is basically is going to return ID, not like your feature. It's going to return ID. Okay, you see the pay attention so that you'll know that exact difference why you go for Queueable Apex, right? All the 3-4 frameworks is going to run long running process and Apex code asynchronously, but we have a specific reason, a purpose why we go for feature, why you go for the Queueable, batch Apex, and schedulable Apex. That difference you should know. Got me? It can be used in feature method only. Which one, ma? You're asking? Can be used in feature method. Which one you're asking? Which one you're asking? Serialize? No. That's a general. I told you, right? Integration. When you get data from Excel system in JSON format, then how to convert this into string? So that's a methods we have: serialize and deserialize. Serialize means convert a object to string, and deserialize string to object. So you need to understand the data format. When you pass data from one system to another system, what are the two different format we have currently? XML and JSON. These are two formats. In general, we have you need to pass the data in these two formats between two systems. Got me? So when you display the account record in the debug log, what is the data format you get? You display the account record in the database, log, JSON format, isn't it? So we have right in JSON format. Through API, we get the data from inbuilt API. We get data from database and display here. So JSON format. Okay. So how to read the JSON format? How to convert them into string? So we have methods belongs to a class called JSON. So those detailed session you will see it later, not now. Okay. Got me? Back to Queueable Apex. So Queueable Apex again it's going to run the process, long running process, but the Queueable Apex will enable you to run one asynchronous process after other, which cannot be done in one feature, right? One feature cannot call another feature, isn't it? One feature cannot call another feature. But in the case of Queueable, you can chain the jobs. Chaining job is what? Jobs means what? One after the other you can run. Okay. Why you go for Queueable? Queueable Apex. You can able to queue the jobs. You can able to queue the jobs one after the other. It's called chaining the job. That can be done. And what else? The Queueable Apex can accept any type of argument. It's not just primitive like your feature. And it's going to return ID. So these are the differences you should know. When you have ID, then you can programmatically, you can, suppose I have a requirement to send email once a job is done. You can do that in the future Queueable Apex because you got ID. Using ID, you can get the status of the job, whether it's done or on hold. Then you send a status accordingly to the users, right? So you should know how to send an email from Apex. That I will cover. Need to cover later after this session, and you have some pending topics, right? That I would cover how to send email. So Queueable Apex, where you use when you have long running process and you need to chain one after the other, then you go for Queueable Apex. Okay, so right, I just we'll see what is the syntax and how to write a. So Queueable Apex, you have to implement. Suppose this is my class, and how to run a set of code asynchronously using Queueable framework. We need to implement the interface called Queueable interface. The interface name is Queueable. It's standard interface. What is the rule of interface? Anybody? What is the rule of interface? Why you go for interface? Interface is like a set of rules that needs to be followed, right? So interface will have just a method signature. Yes, it will have a method signature, right? The interface will have just a method signature. You have to provide implementation for all the methods in the interface in your class that implementing that interface. So what are the methods we have in the Queueable interface? We have just one method. That method is void method. Sorry, execute method, and which has an argument called Queueable context. That argument is called Queueable. Nothing but a class. Okay, a class object. So whatever you have in this method, okay, whatever you have within this method, that's going to run asynchronously. Okay, when you say asynchronously, which means what? You'll take here governor limits for your SOQL also, okay, which is applicable in all the asynchronous method. Okay, and whatever statement you have here, that will can run in asynchronously. Where you have to monitor, you have to go to the Apex job and monitor it. Right, let's go to the queue. So here just an example, I'm going to just insert simple record, but real time you may have long running process or something, right? Okay, you'll have here. Right now I just have just simple logic here. So how to run this? Feature method is just a regular method, so one right you can call like this. But how to perform the Queueable Apex? The Queueable Apex has to perform in different way. Let me explain that. Yeah, So if you like to call this method, then you have to first you have to take the instance, create the instance, and this instance must be passed as an argument to how to push this method to the queue, logic to the queue, in queue, and what I have to pass here. That's it. If you do this, that's how you'll execute this. Call this method execute, and it will go to the queue now. It will go to the queue now. So if you see refresh, you'll see Queueable would come here. It goes to the queue. Okay, you follow this, all of you? You follow this? You'll have detailed notes I will upload. You follow this? My question is, just let me know if you have any queries. Right? This all you will, right? So how to change the jobs? Suppose I have a job. I have another job. I have another job. I have another job. Okay, so we know the limitation in the feature method, right? One after the other we cannot invoke. But now we are going to see how to uh, call one, how to run one asynchronous process one after the other. How to execute one asynchronous process one after the other. So my objective is once this process run, I need to pick up this process. Again, it will go to the queue. And once this process is done, I need to call this process. How to do that? So when you do this, only this process will run. How to do the another process? One after the other, one after the other. You'll go to, yeah, here. From here, I'm going to call this, right? So next to this, you're going to have this system dot enqueue. Okay, so what I have to pass here? What I have to pass here? In an object of right? Then how to call async 3 after async 2? So again, you'll have as a last statement in your execute, I'm going to have this. Can I do like this? Instead of, I can say one statement, right? I can do like this. All of you is clear with the short format of, okay, be familiar with the writing, no short form of writing so that you can save some statement. Okay, so try to develop the habit of writing short form, right? So now I can change the jobs. This done, then this will be started, and once this is done, and this will be started. Okay, you cannot do like this. You cannot do like this. right? One after the other only you should run. In case if you have a need to, if you are in need to change the jobs, this is how you'll do. So run this. What happens? I'll go here and see. I hope three queueable, three queueable, right? Once completed, other one start, other one the next one will start. We have very less, just one statement here, right? So no time difference here. Okay, you got it? You got it, all of you. And it returns the ID, right? It returns ID. The feature method returns ID, and the feature method returns ID. So ID, job ID. So you can get the ID in the programmatically. You can get the ID here. Okay, programmatically get the ID. So what I can do to know the status of the job, when you have an ID with you, how to get the status? Every job, every asynchronous job we run, we'll take a row, we'll insert a row into the standard object called async apex job. What is the job name? Async apex job. Okay, sorry, not job, object. Async apex object. We'll take a row. System will insert a row into this object whenever you run a asynchronous process. Okay, so and this ID of this record is nothing but your job ID. ID of this object record is nothing but your job ID. So I can browse this object. I can browse this object. These are the fields. You can you can get these from your workbench also. Async apex job, right? So we'll see. All right. So whatever we run so far and today, everything takes a row over here, right? So when you do this programmatically, you may have such type of statement. Okay, like this, you can. Right now, you can get the status. Right? Right. How to write a test class for this? How to write a test class for this? Suppose I need to cover this code coverage because this is an Apex class, right? When you migrate to production, it needs to be covered, right? How to run a test class for this? Any feature method or any Apex class, any asynchronous process, you test, then you have to use start test and stop test mandatorily. Okay, rest of things we know, right? If you are going to test something, this logic, then you have to browse the object and check whether the account is inserted. Okay, with this name, that's the asset equal you'll do. But how to test the asynchronous process? You have to test with between the start test and stop test. You have to test between stop test and stop test. Suppose you are going to test this, then it can be like this. So what is this? Stop test and stop test block, within which you are going to call the class. That's it, right? So how you are going to test this? You need to call the method, right? You need to call this method. You need to queue this method. Queue this, right? How to queue that? take the object and pass argument as the enqueue job. So you cannot do like this. You cannot test. When you test like this, it will go to the asynchronous, right? Queue. A test method and asynchronous will not have any will not have any connectivity, right? Once it is, because this is a synchronous process. Your testing is a synchronous process. Your enqueue job is a synchronous process. So what you have to do? You have to use this block to force asynchronous process, to synchronous process. Okay, so you have to use this start test and stop test. Okay, you have to test like a synchronous process. You cannot test asynchronous process from the test class. You have to make it synchronous. Okay, then as usual, right? What it does, it basically insert the record. So we get the record and verify it. Okay, you follow this, all of you? It's clear? Similarly, your feature method. Okay, it should be run within start test and stop test. Every asynchronous process should test within start test and stop test. Okay, you follow this, all of you? All of you? I was expecting you to ask this, but none of you asked this. You know how to write a test class for a trigger? You know how to write a test class for a trigger? Can anybody try and let me know whatever the trigger I have sent to you in the notes we have covered in the session? Can you write a test class for it? Can you refer yourself and get back? Some exercise is given last yesterday, right? Some exercise. Any of you done with that? Any of you done that? Nobody? Okay. So what is the test framework is used? Why we are using that? Right? We through test class we are going to run an actual class logic. That's your testing framework, right? Your asset equal and all is just to uh, verify the values, right? It's a best practice. But when you have the full code coverage, when you are able to run your class or trigger logic through the test class, then code coverage will be done. Asserting value is basically an additional best practice we are doing. Am I right or wrong? Am I right or wrong? Guys, am I right or wrong? When you will have the code coverage, if I am able to run all the statement, then the code coverage will be done, right? Correct. So when the trigger will run? When the trigger will run? When the trigger will run? Then how to run the trigger logic? How can I run this trigger logic? Yeah, that's a key point. After the action. So what do you have to do in the test class then? What do you have to do in the test class then? Right? I need to test this, right? This is my trigger I need to run. How am I going to run that, write the test class? Okay, this is how you'll give the naming convention, follow the naming convention, right? At a test. Yeah, tell me now how to call this, how to run this trigger so that the code coverage will be done, isn't it? How to run? Any idea? See, all I have to do is perform some DML, right? When you will cover this before insert. So what is the logic we have? We have logic if the industry is apparel, then it goes to rating will be cold, right? So we have to initiate the DML here. That's it. Account A. So code coverage, covering for trigger is simpler. right? Maybe we'll insert bulk volume of data. That's the best practice. But for a quick reference, I just inserting just one record for you. But you have to insert in a loop. Okay. So what is the industry apparel? Okay, then you have to perform DML. Only if you perform DML, automatically it runs a trigger. That's it. Correct, Mark? You follow this. When you do this, what happens? It will fire the trigger because we perform DML, right? So if you have, right, if you check this, you'll come to know, right? So what is the code coverage for that? No code coverage. What is it? Fixed trigger handler, right? Okay. Why it is no code coverage? No trigger. Direct test account trigger. Not this one. Run this again. Maybe it's not updated properly. Oh, okay. You got it. What's happening? We deactivated, right? We deactivated. So what I do, I run this. You will see, right? Your main trigger is 100% covered. Okay, because before and after. And here you will see, as per the test data, we are able to through this logic, but not this one. We have to prepare the test data accordingly, right? All you have to do is perform the DML, and then you have to assert the value. You have to browse and check whether the industry is apparel or not. That you can assert the value. That must be done as a best practice. You got me? So covering the code coverage for trigger is just you have to run the trigger by performing DML, whatever the DML you that you are expecting. Got me? It's clear. Writing a test class for trigger is simpler. You can try writing test class for all the classes trigger we have written. Okay, and let me know your queries. Fine, ma. Find all of you. So Monday we'll connect. We'll continue the asynchronous process. Okay, sorry we extended long duration now, but hope you got the concept. We'll continue on Monday. Happy weekend. Take care.